Take a look at these pictures. And they are not some random islands scattered in our oceans. In fact, this, and even this part of the Antarctic is France. But how is that possible? Because when we think about France, we are almost every time thinking about this France, which is the mainland France or metropolitan France. However, often overshadowed by major global powers like the United States, China, and Russia, France's extensive network of territories scattered around the world always stay low-key parts of France, which most of the world doesn't pay much attention to, but plays a significant role in shaping global dynamics. France's overseas territories are not mere remnants of colonialism, but are in fact economic powerhouses in their own right. From the resource-rich lands of French Guiana to the vibrant Caribbean islands of Guadeloupe and Martinique, these territories provide France with access to valuable resources, exclusive economic zones, and bustling trade routes. Through strategic exploitation and management of these assets, France's economy thrives and its global influence expands. Today, France is one of the major global powers with territories in North and South Americas, the Caribbean, and the Indian, Pacific, and Antarctic Oceans. The presence of territories covering almost the entire globe have become an essential geostrategic asset for France. For instance, it is what allows France to own the second-largest exclusive economic zone on Earth behind the United States. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, or UNCLOS, every country is granted with special rights and privileges over the exploration and use of marine resources, both living and non-living, up to a standard distance of 200 nautical miles from a country's baseline, which is usually the low water line along its coast. So when we look at the coastline of mainland France, it only covers a total of little over 300,000 square kilometers of exclusive economic zone. However, when all of these overseas territories are taken into account, the total EEZ soars to a staggering 10.2 million square kilometers, which means as much as 96% of the French EEZ is due to these overseas territories. Furthermore, beyond economic prowess, France's overseas territories serve as critical strategic military outposts. These territories, such as Réunion in the Indian Ocean and French Polynesia in the Pacific, allow France to project its military might and maintain a presence in key regions. In the last decade or so, the world has witnessed the power dynamic shift dramatically from Western Hemisphere to Asia. And with substantial military presence in the Pacific, Asia-Pacific, and the Indian Ocean, France is able to position itself to exude greater influence, power, and control over the international maritime trade routes. You see, more than 80% of the trade in the world take place via major shipping lanes. Therefore, the countries that have strategically located military bases and ports on or near major shipping lanes naturally have the power to influence the traffic passing through these maritime zones. If you take a look at the map of main maritime shipping lanes around the world, it's apparent that most of the traffic uses the North and South Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean, and some Trans-Pacific lanes. And when we compare it to the map of French overseas territories, it's evident that many territories like Mayotte and Réunion, Saint Martin, Guadeloupe, and French Guiana are either close or right in the path of these shipping lanes. And many of these territories are heavily militarized. They are everywhere. In fact, they are so strategically positioned around the globe that the sun never sets on the French Empire, literally. The French territory has the most number of time zones in the world. So when half of the world is sleeping at night, the French are always on their toes to blare the alarm and take actions whenever deemed necessary. Furthermore, having an overseas territory like French Guiana has also helped France to build its powerful space program. French Guiana, located on the northeastern coast of South America, offers a favorable geographical location for space launches. In fact, the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope would have been very difficult if France did not have French Guiana and the European Space Agency. Its proximity to the equator provides a significant advantage in terms of fuel efficiency. However, France has a dirty secret. During the 1960s, the French conducted extensive atmospheric and underground nuclear weapons testing in French Polynesia, primarily for military and strategic reasons. From 1966 to 1996, 193 tests were conducted in the Mururoa and Fangataufa atolls in French Polynesia, causing environmental contamination, including soil and water pollution, as well as radioactive fallout in the surrounding areas. According to one report by BBC, France concealed the true impact of its nuclear tests in the Pacific from the 1960s to the 1990s. Their estimations indicated that approximately 110,000 individuals in French Polynesia were impacted by the radioactive fallout resulting from these tests. Astonishingly, this figure represents nearly the entire population residing in French Polynesia at the time, as concluded by the researchers. Based on further investigation, it was discovered that the levels of radiation resulting from French nuclear tests were significantly higher, ranging from 2 to 10 times compared to the estimates provided by France's Atomic Energy Commission, or CEA, in a 2006 report. According to the report, many families living in the area developed cancer, and the amount of radiation exposure was astronomically higher than the safe levels. However, France's Nuclear Victims Compensation Committee confirmed that the fallout in the Tahiti area had already been documented and numerous compensation requests have been approved. However, according to the report, only 63 Polynesian civilians have received compensation thus far, highlighting a significant discrepancy between the number of individuals affected and the number who have received compensation. And the discrepancies don't end here. In fact, it's just the start. Despite all of these territories around the world which are technically France, there is an enormous dichotomy between French metropolitan and overseas territories when it comes to the economic health, employment, and overall standard of living. For example, if you take a look at the poverty rates in various areas of metropolitan France, for instance, Saint-Denis, which is the poorest area in metropolitan France, it had a poverty rate of 27.9%, which stood as an exception. It was the sole metropolitan department with a poverty rate exceeding 25%. The second poorest department, Aude, had a poverty rate of 20.8%. However, the poverty rates in overseas departments are cripplingly high. In the same year, Martinique exhibited a poverty rate of 28.6%, Guadeloupe 34.5%, La Réunion 38.3%, French Guiana 52.9%, and Mayotte at an alarming 77.3%. Unfortunately, this isn't a temporary situation resulting from exceptional circumstances, but rather a persistent trend with likely structural roots. For example, colonization. You see, the historical legacy of colonization has had a lasting impact on the economic development of overseas territories. Colonies were often exploited for their resources and labor, with wealth being extracted and concentrated in the colonizing country. This history of economic exploitation has contributed to major economic challenges faced by some overseas territories, which is very much relevant even to this day. Furthermore, some overseas territories are simply affected by its geography and remoteness, which can make transportation and trade more expensive. Limited land area, geographical isolation, and vulnerability to natural disasters also hinder economic growth and development. Therefore, there is a possibility that local residents of these territories may protest for more inclusivity and development of the local economy, or even independence. You see, the French overseas territories, to a large extent, are a product of a historical imperialistic past. This legacy has led to the classification of two territories, New Caledonia and French Polynesia, as non-self-governing territories by the United Nations. Consequently, the UN General Assembly has consistently passed resolutions affirming the right to self-determination for New Caledonia and French Polynesia. These resolutions have been adopted annually, spanning from 2008 to 2020 for New Caledonia and from 2013 to 2020 for French Polynesia, and are expected to continue in the future. Therefore, if the majority of the inhabitants in these territories express a desire for independence, they would automatically receive the support of the UN General Assembly. And thus, the risk of permanent territorial loss is real if France doesn't take urgent action to improve affairs in its overseas territories. The first thing France needs to address is the issue of high unemployment rates in its overseas territories and implement comprehensive measures to enhance their socioeconomic conditions. Taking concrete actions to rectify these challenges would demonstrate to the local populations that the French government is committed to addressing the needs and concerns of the entire nation, including the overseas territories. This would be a significant stride towards dispelling the perception that these territories are treated as an afterthought. It's true that policies can take a very long time to put in place and to produce lasting, visible effects, but France must act now if it wants to maximize its chances of keeping its overseas territories. These territories, from a strategic standpoint, are invaluable to France's global strategy position. But if France doesn't pay attention more than ever to its own territories, France would diminish into an only European power with a reduced importance on the international stage. This is Stories Across, and thank you for watching.